Welcome to In Conversation. I'm your host, Steve Iverson. Today we have with us Joe Lahiff, who is running for the 15th Middlesex District representative seat that Jay Kaufman is vacating. Joe is a longtime Lexington resident, and he's going to talk to us about why he's running and his background. And thanks for coming on, Joe.
Oh, glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
You bet. Have you lived in Lexington your whole life, or just a big chunk of it?
Most of it. We started out briefly in Arlington. My parents moved here when I was 4 years old back in the early 70s. Went to Bridge School and then on to Clark and Lexington High School. I got married, moved out briefly when my wife and I first got married, bought our first house, but moved right back here again, and all three of my kids have gone through Lexington school systems. The largest chunk of my life I've been here.
Yeah.
By far.
A real native.
Yeah, it's a great town.
Why did you decide to run?
Well, it's been, I've been asked that by a lot of people.
Yeah, I would think so.
And the easiest thing for me to do is to be 100% candid.
Yeah.
I've wanted to do this my entire life.
Oh.
When I was young, very young actually, I got hired by the Lexington Police Department. I spent 22 years there as a police officer, then a detective, and then a school resource officer. Spent 5 years as a school resource officer, and I'd love to talk about that more too. But
sure.
As for why I'm running, when I was brand new, got hired back in 1989 full-time. I started in 86 as a cadet, but in 1989 got hired full-time, and shortly thereafter, I was asked to take part in the police union. I became vice president of the union, and then in 1994, I ran for president of the union, got elected. That was the same time Jay was running for re-election. And I remember watching him get elected, watching him campaign, and enjoying the process very much. I had a small family going. My youngest was born. 2 more were to come. I had a good career going, and I just continued on it. I got elected to president 2 years after that, and spent the next 8 years as a union president for Lexington Police, representing the sergeants and detectives and the patrol officers. As I was doing that, I would find I would spend time at Beacon Hill for different issues, whether it was funding for higher education for police officers or looking for an increase in the budget for school resource officers or whatever the issue may be. I would be on Beacon Hill dealing with Jay and loved every time I visited.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the place. I thought the process was fascinating. I felt at home there.
It's sort of in your blood.
It was in my blood. After the 10 years I spent with the Lexington Police Union, I got elected to the International Board of Directors. At the time, it was called the International Brotherhood of Police Officers that we were a part of. It's a 50,000 person union, part of SEIU, and they asked me to be on the executive board for a 4-year term.
Are they nationwide?
Nationwide.
Okay.
International, actually.
International, you
yes,
said that.
It's local 5,000 of the SEIU.
Okay.
So it was a big undertaking. It was a big seat. I loved it.
Yeah.
And I continued to meet with Jay on different issues. I continued to, in this case, go to the Capitol in Washington to deal with different issues and found it fascinating. And again, knew it was in me. I never ran against Jay. I thought he was doing a nice job. I had no issues with what he was doing. He always listened to me. He always heard our concerns out. We probably didn't agree on everything, but he was certainly trying his hardest and doing a good job. When he announced he was retiring, it was an instant. I meant, and if I may...
You knew right away?
I knew right away. Yeah. I'd like to tell you just a brief end story to this.
Yeah.
I think it's funny, and I hope you will as well. I was with a bunch of friends at the time, and I got a call from a friend in Lexington who follows politics, and he was informing me. It was an evening. He was informing Jay just announced he's retiring. It was very early on, very early. And I looked at the group of guys I was with, and I said, Jay Kaufman's retiring. I'm going to run for his seat. And the guys were looking at me, yeah, whatever.
Right.
It was a joke. They didn't take me seriously. Well, I went ahead and I called 4 or 5 other people that I knew would get the ball rolling and would get my name out there in consideration and kind of let people know I really wanted this.
Right.
Got everybody I wanted on the phone, talked to them, had things going smoothly. I went home, woke up Saturday morning and realized I hadn't told my wife.
Oh my God.
So
Minor oversight.
Minor oversight. I spent the next hour panicking, waiting for her to wake up so that I could tell her, Kelly, I did this. I told
Yeah.
enough people that if I had to pull out now, I'd be embarrassed.
How'd she take it?
She loved it.
Oh, good.
She absolutely loves it. It's you. It's,
Good.
it's something you've wanted your whole life. It's something that's in you. You'll be good at it. I'm behind you. Let's do it.
Maybe you knew in the back of your mind that she'd be certain to support you.
Yeah.
So, you know,
She's great. She's a full-time nurse, and she's taking as much time as she can to participate in every event I go to.
Yeah.
So she's wonderful. We just celebrated our 26th anniversary on Wednesday.
yeah, congratulations.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
fantastic.
But it's in me. I guess that's the
Yeah.
best answer as to why I'm running.
Yeah. Well, I imagine being involved in any union, large organization has its political aspects. As you said, you had to go to Beacon Hill to talk about things, and so you were sort of active politically for quite a while.
Yeah. It kind of continued. The current job that I'm doing now, I work for a company called New Path. It's in Woburn.
Which is in Woburn.
Yeah.
I made a mistake earlier and thought that perhaps you had moved to Woburn, and I was wrong. Joe is still living in Lexington. But you work in Woburn.
I do. I work
Okay.
in Woburn. Our company is celebrating its 50th anniversary in Woburn.
Oh,
New Path, I think it originally was called CMark.
Seamark?
CMark. And most people remember and still have different arcs in their regions. That's their company name. We rebranded ourselves as New Path, not wanting to use what the R stood for. And at the time, a retarded person is the way they were addressed. Didn't fit with our mindset.
Sure.
They're people. We
Sure.
support them. We make their lives more fulfilling. That's our mission, or a big part of our mission. But when they hired me, this was a fascinating change in my life. I spent the greater part of my career as a police officer negotiating contracts with the town manager and helping unions negotiate contracts. We spent 10 years, by the way, this is important to me, in a cooperative effort with Rick White, the then town manager, with Chris Casey, who was then police chief, and didn't file a grievance. I would go in and talk to Rick, or in particular, I would go in and talk to Chris. And say, this is what we need. What do you need to make it work? And he found it valuable to do the same. Chris, in particular, bought into the idea of we're partners. We need to find out, how do you get what you need, I get what I need, and the business stays in business, in
Sure.
this case, the town. It got so successful, he invited me to come speak at the International Association of Chiefs of Police Conference in Toronto. We went up there and we spoke to 200 chiefs 3 different days, 200 each, 3 different days, on union management relations and the unnecessary need of using paperwork and grievances to accomplish things. You know, if you just listen, slow down, and talk to each other and make eye contact and
Right.
hear what the other person's saying. Well, New Path was going through a change that it had never dealt with before. My wife is part-time, she's a full-time registered nurse, but works part-time for New Path.
Oh.
I was sitting at home one Saturday morning, and there was a knock on my door. I answered the door, and there was a woman there in head-to-toe SEIU purple, the purple colors that SEIU wears, and they're union colors. They're easily identifiable. I knew instantly who she was, or what she represented, not who she was, but what she represented. And I expected her to have questions for me, being a union person. She asked, is Kelly home? And I said, no, I'm sorry, she's not home. And she, I really need to talk to her, tell her she doesn't have to be afraid. And I said, no, she's really not home. After a little while, I convinced her she wasn't home. She gave me some literature to leave for Kelly, so I left it on the kitchen table. She came home finally and says, what's this? I said, it's for you, you tell me. Why are you getting union literature? And she said, New Path is going union. There are over 450 employees, 350 of them were unionizing. And I talked to her about it, and she said, geez, her opinion was, I don't think New Path knows how to deal with it. They're really, managerially speaking, struggling with it. I sent, being creative and being retired, I sent the president of the company an email saying, I've got time. This is my past experience. I've dealt with SEIU. I like them. If you'd like some help dealing with your union, I'd be happy to help you. And he sent me back a text and an email in an hour. Can you come in on Monday?
He wanted some help.
He wanted some help. I met with him for an hour. I went in dressed like this. I went in casually and was instantly greeted by him and 6 vice presidents.
Wow.
So, again, okay, what are we talking about today?
Yeah.
They picked my brain for an hour and a half, 2 hours. Said, we need more. Will you come back tomorrow? The same exact thing, same people, another 2 hours. And at the end of it, I can't do this, he said to me. I really can't. Would you come in and negotiate my contract for me?
Yeah.
I went in and negotiated a union contract on management side. That was back in 2013. I'm very, very pleased to say that we just renegotiated a successor agreement. And the fascinating part of this, the thing that really ties into what I was talking about we did with the town of Lexington, we negotiated a successor 3-year agreement, which included an over 13% pay raise for every employee. Took 2 days.
Wow.
There was no animosity. There was discussions at the table. We didn't agree on everything, but the parties agreed to a 3-year successor in 2 days. It doesn't have to be that argumentative, pound my fist until I get my way style.
It's good to know. We need more of that, don't we?
I think we do.
I mean, people are polarized quite a bit across the country at the moment,
Yes,
and have a hard time talking to each other sometimes. It's a valuable skill.
I've enjoyed it. I'm hoping to bring that to Beacon Hill. I got asked a question at Jake Hoffman's forum, which was 2 weeks ago. And the question was, how will you work with the other legislators on the Hill? And my instant answer was, well, it's hard to say no to me. I talk and talk and talk,
Yeah.
and we'll figure out what each other needs somehow.
Sure.
It's not just a no, you can't have it. We figure out, what do you need? What do I need? How do we both get to where we want to get to? And obviously, there's compromise that needs to happen, and that's a part of the process.
Other things in particular that you would like to focus on if you were to win the election? Do you have any pet projects, things that you'd really like to pay some attention to?
Sure. And that's a very common question.
Yeah, I would think so.
Probably falls right behind why you're doing this.
Right.
And I'm calling this a learning curve.
Sure.
Most people will ask me that question, what are your priorities? What do you want to get? And I'll tell them my priorities. I had 5 years as a school resource officer. School safety needs to be improved upon.
Okay.
And we've got some great things going on in Massachusetts. There was some legislation that just passed. Sean Garberly put it together in Arlington. It's called Restorative Justice. Wonderful, wonderful building block off of something that we put into place almost 20 years ago when I was a school resource officer. It builds on the juvenile diversion program, and I'll get into that more. But something I've found, as opposed to me telling people this is what I'm in favor of, I've been finding as I knock on doors and as I sit and have coffee with people, I'd rather hear what they want to hear.
Sure.
What do you want to say?
Sure.
I know what my talents are. I know what I believe in. That doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to be of assistance to you. I spend more time listening than I do talking in most cases, and this is obviously different because
Right.
we're in a little bit different forum.
And that's especially what we're here for.
It is.
Right.
But with my background in school, I found it incredible. I was primarily assigned up to Minutemen, although I was a school-wide school resource officer and spent time in each of our schools. I was focused on Minutemen, and at the time it was funded partially through the federal government grant. I think it was Bill Clinton.
Your position was
My
funded
position- actually,
partly?
There was $100 million funded by the federal government to put school resource officers everywhere.
Oh, okay.
So Lexington had applied for it and had been awarded that grant.
Okay.
And I think there was more than one. My memory's fading on that a little bit, but I think there was more than one funded. But I know I was part of it.
Okay.
Well, when I went up there, the principal was Jim Amara. He's an absolutely wonderful man. He's still a very good friend. One of the smartest, most educated people I'd ever met in my life. He pulled me aside and he said, get into the cafeteria, walk through, visit the nurses, get to know the teachers, get to know the entire staff. I don't want you here as a police officer.
Sure.
I want you here as a caretaker, which is what our educators are. The nice thing about having me there and having his support, I brought to them a perspective that teachers wouldn't be looking for. If you see a child in crisis, when you're a police officer, you're looking and seeing totally different mannerisms. What one person is doing to me may trigger, okay, this is developing into something. And a teacher might not even see it because they're focused on how they're doing in math or how they're doing in science
Right.
or how they're doing in whatever class they may be teaching. A guidance counselor may not see it because the student chooses not to go to see the guidance counselor. The guidance counselor will call and ask for the child to come and meet with them. But another lesson that I learned, and this was primarily from Jim Amara, again, I'm using him, but the kids here, as far as information flow, are in charge. They truly are. They decide who they want to talk to, when they want to talk to them, where they want to talk to them, what they're willing to say. They control every bit of the information that flows from them. And all you have to do is ask a parent. If the kid comes home from school, how was your day? What do you get from the kid?
I think a lot of the times, most of the communication is between the kids using social media.
Oh, vastly
Yeah.
increasing now. Yeah, I was one of the first at the police department to have a cell phone, and then begged and begged and begged for texting, because kids would text me, this person's getting bullied right now, whereas they couldn't necessarily tell me.
Yeah.
You know, if you can get texted that there's bullying going on in the basketball court, or there's bullying going on in the cafeteria, through a text message and respond instantly, the kid having to leave the bullying area and come not only gives themselves away as telling me, but also it may be over by the time I get there.
Wow.
So it was incredibly valuable. Huh. But what I also found was that the teachers adapted to me and liked the idea that I wasn't in uniform. I wasn't there as a police officer, although I always wore something identifying me as police. I was very, very fortunate. I had gone to a police week. May is Memorial Police Week, is in the middle of Mother's Day week. And we go down to Washington, D.C. every year at the time. I haven't been in years, but we used to go regularly. I met a Lexington, Kentucky police officer. He was a great guy, and we instantly kind of headed off, both from Lexingtons, although totally different.
Different Lexingtons, yeah.
He was wearing a pullover that said Police and Lexington on the side of it. Didn't say Kentucky, just Police and Lexington.
Oh.
I said, I want that. How much for it? Would you sell it to me? He said, give me your badge. I want your Lexington Mass badge.
Oh.
We traded. It was the greatest trade I ever
really?
made. I said, absolutely, be happy to.
Oh.
So I got that pullover. I wore it to school. And I had a funny experience with the head guidance counselor at the time. She was among the interview panelists that interviewed me to get the job. She said, I had a student come up to me last week and say, Mrs. Chapman, did you hear there's a narc in the school? And she looks at me and says, you mean the one wearing police on the front?
It's a giveaway.
Yeah. She said, yeah, you saw him? Yes. But that soft uniform adapted me much, much better into the school environment.
Yeah.
As teachers want to protect their kids. And law enforcement can be seen as a bit of a scare to anyone.
Yeah.
So breaking down that boundary mattered. I wound up being hired as a lacrosse coach to break down the barrier even further.
Yeah.
I then got appointed to the school council, and the school council members elected me as chairman.
So the school council at Minuteman.
Yeah, Minuteman.
And is that sort of the legislative body within the school?
It's primarily there to assist the principal in guiding. Yes, we don't have any actual authority over the school committee.
Oh, okay.
The school committee runs the budget,
Okay.
decides the curriculum, all of those things. The school council is there to advise the principal and to assist him in carrying out what the school committee has set as a guide. It exists in Lexington in general, not just at Minuteman, but in other schools as well. And it was an honor. It was truly an honor to be part of it. And it's just a big part of what I discovered was that through being there and through walking the cafeteria, kids would choose me to speak to. Not all of them. Some of them would choose their guidance counselor or the social worker or any other staff member, but a select number chose me. And I was able to help. In particular, I had one student that came up to me and said, my dad is beating my mom.
Wow.
That's not a teacher issue.
No.
That's not something you would tell a teacher. And for Minuteman, they didn't live in town. But because of the juvenile diversion program that I referenced earlier, it was started under Martha Coakley in the Middlesex DA's office. I would go to these regional meetings that included Watertown, Lincoln, every single town in our district. And there were 16 towns in Minuteman's district. I knew police officers in every one of the towns. And I was able to call the school resource officer from that school and say, this is going on at this person's home. How do we assist the family? And got them the tools that they needed. I don't have the authority to exercise over a Watertown student's home or a Lincoln student's home, but I certainly had the resources available to find help.
So you could call someone there.
So you could call someone.
Yeah.
It was fascinating. So school violence, bullying is an issue to me. It's something I think we can expand on further. In Lexington, I think we can particularly really expand on the school resource officer program. I think it needs some support, and I'm hoping to find ways in the state to do what the federal government did and to fund some of those really valuable programs that can end bullying, or at least do its best to end bullying.
So you'd like to see it expanded even more?
I would. Absolutely.
And
And I want them to have, at the time, we were really pioneers. The DARE program was very, very popular for a long time, and DARE sort of faded out, and school resource officers took their place. They're totally different things. DARE officer served a purpose and focused on drugs and did that role well. School resource officer encompassed what DARE did and took it to the next step. With school resource officers doing that, I needed to understand that as part of my role, I was not necessarily a law enforcement officer. It's always there. It's always in me. I always have the badge. I always have the gun. I always have the handcuffs. They were hidden well so the kids wouldn't be afraid of them. But God forbid, for safety, they were there. My role wasn't to be a law enforcement person, though. My goal was to be a caretaker. And police officers, when they accept that position, need to understand you may see things that are happening that a patrol officer would, at the time marijuana was illegal. You'd see an 18-year-old senior with marijuana and, you may arrest him. Well, school resource officer wants to deal with the problems differently.
Right.
I want to find out why you're using it. I want to find out what can I do to help you stop using it at school and to learn here. This is a safe place. Stop bringing it here.
It's interesting you say that because there's an email discussion list in Lexington that a lot of people use to talk about what's going on in town. And for some reason, several months ago, there was talk about having police in the high school. I guess it's a school resource officer, and some in the middle school. And some people thought it could be a fantastic idea. A couple of people said, well, the problem with that is that a child might say more than they should say if they do something wrong, if they're engaged in criminal activity, and that could they could end up being arrested instead of helped. Or essentially, it's my own spin on it. It sounds to me, though, that from what you said, that it's that's not necessarily what would happen.
Well, fortunately, that's exactly, the description you gave is exactly right. That was a fear, and it probably still is, partly just through a lack of advertising, I guess, a lack of people understanding what we did and what exists. And I'm hoping, I retired in 2009, so the program, when I left it in 2009, was this. I'm looking forward to seeing it restored if it's not that and improved upon. But at the time, juvenile diversion was created, and it was created in cooperation not only between Lexington Police Department, who had to buy into it, Middlesex District Attorney had to buy into it, the school and the school committee had to buy into it. And what this juvenile diversion program allowed was, if I did discover some child doing something illegal and they admitted to it, they didn't go to court. Juvenile diversion allowed the school to oversee the disciplinary process. So you would do community service, and we'd assign whatever guidance counselor, whatever staff, or support staff, myself included, would best oversee the student and make sure that we're fulfilling the obligations, including making certain grades, including participating in after-school activities. It was not meant in any way to be punitive, and it completely eradicated the possibility of a record, which I loved.
Yeah.
I don't want to see that spiral of a kid getting a record or getting expelled because of an infraction, and continuing the spiral so that life is an uphill challenge instead of something they can succeed at. And it worked well. I think what Sean Garbley put together with restorative justice will help that. It's an adult version of it, but it certainly is a good step forward.
It sounds to me, and tell me if I'm mistaken, but from what you've said so far and the things you've talked about, I get the impression that among the things you might spend time on, if you were our representative, it sounds like things having to do with human services are sort of dear to your heart, and that you might focus on that a little bit more than someone else who might be fascinated with transportation, for instance.
Correct. Yeah, but yes. The people that I work with every day at New Path are angels. The work that they do is more, I was told when I started there, this is a calling. You can do it or you can't do it. Anybody can get a job and give it a shot, give it their best try. What they're doing every single day, supporting people with disabilities, they're angels. And they start out there making $14 an hour. The people that are doing the work need more support. The work that's being done needs more funding. Our company again, is so far ahead of the curve and something that I'm so exceedingly proud of. I'm trying to be a little bit quieter than normal because we're on TV. I want to yell about this. I really do.
Okay.
We find employment for people that were in the past deemed no way. You couldn't possibly employ that person. We have professionals that come in and teach a job camp that teach people how to interview. And if you're not able to interview, we'll interview with you. We assign job coaches to individuals who are totally capable of doing certain jobs. Not everybody's capable of doing everything. I certainly couldn't be a surgeon. I was a police officer. You have different skills in life. Just because you have a disability does not mean you don't have a skill. We excel at finding that. The team of clinicians that are there, the employment staff that are there, the administrators who have committed to making this work, even though funding is a challenge for it. When we're funded for whatever behaviors or whatever individual, that funding is earmarked. It has to be spent on certain programs. We fundraise. We fundraise every year to get discretionary income to allow us to do employment initiatives. The state's changing its mind. The state's seeing the value in it and is actually starting to fund some of the things we're doing. I'd like to see that continued. We also have pioneered a program called CBDS, Community-Based Day Supports, where just because you have a disability in the past, you would go to a day program and you would spend your entire day in a program, sheltered almost away from the world. That's not experiencing life. Our community-based day program, regardless of your disability, avoids going to the program at all. You're picked up at home, 3 or 4 other people are picked up with you, and you go straight into the community. And if you're an artist, you spend your day doing art. If you're talented at something else, you spend your days doing something else. And if you're severe enough disability, you go to the library, you go to the museum, you go to the Fenway Park, you do things that you would do in a regular day, whether you had a disability or not.
You get out into the real world.
Yes. I'd like to see that expanded on funding-wise. The people that we support, many of them can't speak. Not that they don't have a loud enough voice representative, they can't speak. I wouldn't mind speaking on their behalf and trying to get more for them.
It's certainly a worthy goal.
Thank you.
It certainly is. And it makes me think of a related but separate field or topic, which is mental health. It seems like people with mental illnesses have struggled for I don't know how long a period now, but to get the treatment that they need. And you mentioned earlier that one of the things that you like to do is to ask people what they would like to see done, rather than just talking and saying what you'd like to do. I personally have an interest in seeing mental health services expanded. So if you have any thoughts about that, or if you're on board with that, so much the better.
Sure. Is there a particular aspect that...
Well, it seems like people who, my understanding is people who, especially low-income people who need care, often have a hard time finding a therapist where the wait isn't 6 months, or where the insurance isn't right, things like that. And I think it's actually a nationwide problem. But here in Massachusetts, it would be nice if we could make some progress in that regard, I think.
I agree. And the stigma taken off of it, to allow people to come forward and say, I'm having trouble with an issue. It's causing me stress, it's causing me anxiety, it's causing me whatever it's causing me.
Right.
Too often, they feel like they got to stay in the shadows and hide it until they can no longer tolerate it.
That's right.
There was a Boston police officer who, I think, killed himself a week ago.
Oh.
It's prevalent in policing as well. It exists. And police officers suffer the same mental illness challenges that any population would.
Right.
I learned then that you had to make it a comfortable environment. You need to come out and talk to us. Let us know. It not only may it be curable, it may save you your life.
Right. Right.
Taking away the stigma will matter to me. The funding aspects of it, I think, need to be looked at. I'm going to divert slightly. I've been asked many, many times about raising taxes.
Big topic.
Big topic. I'm probably the most conservative person you're going to meet in the 5 people that you're interviewing.
Right.
I don't like the idea of raising taxes. I've discovered, and I have to preface this a little bit, I read general laws my entire career. That's what you do when you're a police officer. You read the general laws that are passed down.
Right.
In some cases, I took an active role in trying to get them changed, working with Jay or working with whatever legislator we were working with. But I read general laws. I never read the bills. The bills really were behind the scenes. Occasionally, if there was a bill coming up that affected police directly, I might be able to get access to it. Certainly didn't have the internet at the time that had the kind of access. Well, that's changed now. With what I'm doing, I find I read bills all the time. And I'm constantly learning and constantly growing and constantly figuring out how bills are crafted, how they're made, and wanting to be part of the process. And the thing that's been discouraging to me regarding taxes, every single bill I've seen so far, every single one, has been sent to a committee. And they've assigned 10, 12, 14, 15 people to the committee for a study, and then added $50, $100, $150,000 to the budget to accommodate these studies. Some of them are for the most simple ideas you could possibly imagine. Some of them needed to be said no to immediately. No, we're just not going to do that. No, let's take a year, let's fund it for $150,000. I'd like to see that process looked at a lot closer. I suspect that we're probably spending a lot of money unnecessarily, and as opposed to raising taxes, I'd like to curb some of that and focus on putting the money back into where it's really needed. Mental health would certainly be one. Human services in general would be one. Schools would be a top priority for me.
Right.
But that question getting asked a lot of times, and my response to it, I don't make a lot of money. I pay a lot of taxes, and I don't want to see my taxes go up. I wouldn't want to see yours go up. So I'd rather see that we're spending our money appropriately first, and then we can look at if we need an increase in something.
Yeah, there was talk recently about how the so-called millionaire tax never came to anything.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts about that?
I was opposed to it, and I think I was the only one. Jay Kaufman had asked a question about this at his forum. I was the only no at the time, and I guess my friends have told me it was a clear no. It was yes, no. I'm too disappointed in the amount of money that we spend in this state to be prepared to tax anyone. I don't disagree at all that some people can probably afford to pay more taxes. I don't disagree with that in any way, shape, or form. My main interest is that I've seen too often a tax go into place geared for one thing and changed into something totally different. All the best intentions in the world. I think on a federal level we've experienced a lot of angst over Social Security, which 25, 30 years ago was in a lockbox and was not going to be touched. I don't think that lockbox held very tightly. I think our angst over Social Security is probably valid. There's a lot of people that are drawing off of it. And
well, people are living longer after retirement.
Yeah. So it's a great program. Best intentions and needed, absolutely needed, needs to be continued, but shouldn't have been changed. I want to make sure before we approve a millionaire's tax, to use that term, that it's not only well-intentioned, but actually done correctly. And I, at the time, said, no, I did not support that. I didn't think it fit what we needed at the time.
Okay, fair enough. Any other final thoughts about running and what you'd like to get done? And I think you've got, about 3 months between now and the primary?
It was at 70 days, I want to say 2 days ago.
Okay.
September 4th. I have a clock on my website that has the countdown until you're ready to vote.
Okay.
Absolutely, the last message I would have is I would like to have our viewers vote on September 4th.
Right.
I'd like to be the state representative for the 15th Middlesex district, all of it. And I would also like to add that I want to thank you. I want to thank all the people here at Lex Media for making this possible for me. This has been really fantastic.
Oh, good. I'm glad you came on. We learned a lot about your thoughts on running and what you'd like to do.
Thank you.
Well, very best of luck to you.
Appreciate it, Steve.
You
Thank you
bet.
very much.
You bet. It's been In Conversation. We've been speaking with Joe Lahiff, and thank you for watching.